Have you ever loved someone so much that the thought of losing them felt impossible? Or maybe you have lost someone and no matter how much time's passed, it still feels like a part of you is missing. Most people don't know how to talk about or don't know what to do with grief. We're really never taught what love is supposed to be like after someone passes. Someone significant to us, someone we've built a life with. People spend their lives chasing love, that fairy tale romance. People spend their lives chasing love while also being terrified of loss, terrified of being alone, and doing everything in their power to avoid endings, to avoid that inevitable transition into the afterlife that awaits us all. Today, I'm going to share my love story with my late husband. I'm going to share what my husband's death revealed to me about love, about grief, about life, and what it truly means to live. My husband died 8 years ago. He was 39, and our love, his cancer, his death, my grief, and 8 years of being a widow have taught me that the greatest love story is not always the one with a happy ending. In fact, I've learned that true love has no end. There is no such thing as an ending. And when you live in the depths of darkness and tragedy, holding unconditional love as your light to navigate the narrows, navigate the shadows, you learn that love is more than an emotion, more than a connection, more than an experience. Love is everything. It is infinite. It is unyielding, without bounds, and it cannot be truly defined with words because it is beyond language. And when you remember that love, when you are granted the experience to feel and sense and be connected to that love, then your whole existence becomes your greatest love story. And that's when not only your relationship with yourself changes, but your relationship to fear changes. Welcome to The Simple Source, a paradigm-shifting space where self-love, healing, spirituality, and personal growth are redefined. If you've been told healing takes years, that abundance must be attracted, or that transformation requires struggle, you haven't been told the truth. I'm Linda Valines, a certified trauma-informed holistic coach, author, and spiritual guide. After healing myself from chronic conditions, complex trauma, and lack, not by following traditional frameworks, but by creating my own, I'm now teaching you to love, heal, and free yourself, mind, body, and soul, so you can reclaim your highest health, happiness, and potential with joy and ease. Each week, we go beyond surface-level self-help and into the real mechanics of transformation. If the traditional paths to healing and spirituality haven't produced the changes you want in the life you desire, you're in the right place. You were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. Let's get started with today's episode. So this is a special episode that I'm doing for Podcastathon, which is a charitable event in the podcasting world that highlights charities. And so this episode is dedicated to Soaring Spirits, a charity and an organization that supports widows, people of all ages and backgrounds around the world whose partners in life pass. And when I was invited to be a part of this event, I chose this charity because I became a widow at the age of 35. And that was a life-defining, life-altering event. And many people associate becoming a widow with your senior years. And when you become a widow in your mid-30s with your entire life ahead of you, it's a very different experience. And many people would say that that is not a happy ending. But in this episode, I'm going to share why my husband's death was not a loss, why I never lost him, why love and death are actually two sides of the same coin. And I'm also going to share our love story, which is a story of friendship and deep, profound love and tragedy and death and awakening to hopefully inspire you to know love in a way that many people don't perceive it, and to hopefully inspire you to love more deeply and fiercely in all aspects of your life, in every moment of your life. Because life is fleeting, boy is it fleeting, and death is an inherent part of life. That's the deal, that's the cycle. And when you heal your relationship with death, you're actually then free to live, free to love beyond what you can imagine now. And that is the ultimate meaning of it all. To remember, embody, and live the fact that life is simply love in infinite expressions, including grief, including death, including all the moments that take your breath away and turn your world upside down. And so this episode is also dedicated to Matt. So Matt and I were friends for 2 years before we became more than friends. Matt wasn't just my partner, he was my best friend. And I remember the first time that I met him, I noticed him. We were at a party and his tie, he was wearing a pink tie and it was all janky and it was not tied properly. So I offered to fix it for him so it wouldn't look like a high schooler had tied it. And that's my memory of our first meeting. But he actually remembers meeting me earlier than that when he came to a party at my studio in the foothills. But I have no memory of that. And I still don't remember that. So we were together for nearly 6 years before one morning we very casually decided to get married. And then 2 weeks later, we said our vows in our living room with 2 of our closest friends, and it was perfect. And then 2 months after we got married, Matt was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. He was 37. So if you listen to my earlier podcast about how I healed myself of chronic conditions before he passed, you know that side of the story, how Matt's cancer diagnosis, that whole experience forced me to finally examine why I had been on a healing journey for years and never healed. And in that deep self-reflection, I realized I did not love myself, and that was a defining factor in my health and my happiness. And why I was chronically unhealthy and unhappy, I fundamentally hated myself. And so I vowed to learn to love myself, all parts of myself, as unconditionally as Matt did. And that was another life-altering, life-changing, life-improving experience that was facilitated by Matt. You know, despite cancer obviously being a terrible fucking experience that I don't wish upon anybody, it was actually really beautiful for me and for us and for our relationship, because you are ultimately granted an entirely new perspective and lease on life if you choose to seize the opportunity that way instead of succumbing to fear, succumbing to statistics and numbers, etc., using that opportunity to love more deeply, to live more freely. And people ask me what happened to our relationship during those 2 years after he was diagnosed, when he was moving through treatment after treatment, slowly deteriorating, slowly dying. You know, a life event like that is a relationship defining moment because yes, it was stressful as fuck. And we had opposing views on how to treat his cancer. And that was a massive lesson in compromise and relinquishing control. Obviously, all relationships require compromise. You're 2 different people, 2 different identities, etc. But this was a very distinct lesson in letting go, because it was not my body. Even though Matt, he did end up meeting me halfway and he pursued holistic treatments alongside conventional ones, I had to learn how to balance my care, my concern, my love for him with total surrender. ultimately I had to really let go of the outcome because I couldn't control it. And I could only do so much as his partner. But again, it was ultimately his journey with cancer. And that was one of the earliest lessons that changed me, was learning how to release control, for someone who loved being in control, because control felt like a safety mechanism for me. It was a long developed trauma response. Those 2 years forced me to learn how to truly let go, and in letting go also allow myself to live. Because again, I could only do so much. And at the end of the day, it wasn't my body, it wasn't my journey with cancer, it was Matt's. And so I really learned that love requires deep surrender. Like true unconditional love requires real surrender, because the deeper you love, the more you have to release control. That's what I learned. Love cannot be confined. It cannot be controlled. It demands freedom. It demands sovereignty, because it is innately boundless. And when you are faced with love in the company of death, you learn that very, very quickly. And so in loving Matt unconditionally, I had to truly surrender all outcomes and learn to be so fully present with him in order to love him, in order to live with him. And in giving up control, I also created the space to learn how to love myself unconditionally. I stopped using my energy in a depleting way, which was trying to control everything. And so in relinquishing that, I then had all this newfound energy to love myself. And I believe that that's what happens when you're in a truly healthy, loving, and empowered and aligned relationship, an aligned love. That love is an invitation for you to expand, to know yourself, to love yourself, because it's not just a safe space for you to love another unconditionally, but it is a safe space for you to love yourself unconditionally. That's love. It was a very interesting thing to be in love, to be married with a countdown, to know that your love in the physical realm, your marriage doesn't have an open-ended, decades-long future ahead of you, but likely 2 very brief years. And so there was an urgency to loving myself, to loving Matt, to learning how to love life after literally, 3 decades of hating myself, of hating being alive due to decades of really deep, severe trauma. And it was a masterclass in learning how to be profoundly present and profoundly grateful for the moment, for your breath, for even the ability to love another person, for even the ability to love yourself. Because what do you do when you only have 2 years left with your husband? I hope you fucking live as fully as you can. I hope that that's the choice that you make. And that's what we tried to do. And Matt, the badass that he was, he went and directed another season of Saturday Night Live, where he was a digital shorts director, fully in ongoing cancer treatment, white hair, body totally transformed because of all of the poison essentially constantly being injected into his body. He was doing that while directing videos every single week for Saturday Night Live, because that was his job. And if anybody knows about that schedule, that's a really brutal schedule. And, often, shoots are like 16, 18, 20 hours. And SNL was so amazing to him and to us. But again, I had to relinquish control because I saw, it took a toll on his body. It's a very physically demanding job. But that was his love. That was Matt's love. That was another one of his true loves. And loving Matt unconditionally, loving anybody unconditionally, means you have to allow the person to love what they love freely. So yeah, that was also a gift within itself in that whole experience too, to see Matt's loyalty and his deep love for his passion, because that's how he wanted to spend the last years and months of his life, creating, making art, making people laugh. Like, he never stopped. There was not a moment when he stopped creating and investing in his passion. And I remember the last night that Matt was alive, we sat in our bed and we watched his entire life's work and cried, not just because of what was lost, meaning his budding, amazing career was cut short, but because of what was lived, because the love that he poured into his art was so evident. And that's what makes life full. That love is what makes life full. The love that you infuse your everyday with, not the numbers of years in your life. And Matt loved being a director, and he was fortunate to share that love with a large audience on a regular basis. And we were both very passionate people, and we had so much love for film and art and music, for creativity, for laughter, for science and the mysteries of the universe. And all of that shared love infused itself into our love. And then that made our love like a wholly different, special kind of love, all on its own. And that is actually one of the reasons that I have not remarried since he passed 8 years ago. I know what love can be, how love can transcend like just a connection between two people and become a force within itself. And that's the love that I'm interested in spending the rest of my life with. And so it was a gift to not only love Matt, but to create another level of love between us because we were so passionate. And that passion created another dimension of love. And Matt passed in our dining room on July 9th. And I was standing at the foot of his bed as his mom was sharing a beautiful story about him. And then I just spontaneously heard in my head, "I'm okay." And it was Matt's voice. And I knew it was him. And, then everyone left, his body included. And I just stood in our empty dining room, feeling Matt's presence. And I just told him over and over and over again, like I must have said it like 1,000 times. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Because I could feel him. He was there, like he had never left. And then every day for months, I felt his presence, his distinct presence behind my right shoulder. That's why I actually got a tattoo of his initials behind my right shoulder. But he was there just with me constantly. And he made a joke before he passed because Matt loved horror movies. And I do not like horror movies. So he made it was a very funny joke. He made a joke that he would haunt me after he died. And he was everywhere after he passed. His presence was everywhere. And there was a lot of magic, a lot of turning on and off lights, things falling, magical, crazy events, in nature, like anomalies. And it was just him creating all this magic for me, just to be like, hey, I'm here and I love you. And it was never scary. It was never disorienting. All of it was so infused with so much love that there was never a moment of fear after he passed. And then 2 months later, I was in the Swiss Alps hiking by myself for 3 weeks just to be with my grief. And he came to me. And that's when my entire universe broke open because there he was. And we spoke and we hugged. And it was only love. It was only love. And I knew then, without a doubt, that death is purely a physical event. And we are far more than just physical. So that's when my massive spiritual awakening happened. And I had an involuntary Kundalini awakening in a Hindu Vedanta temple in the Hollywood foothills, listening to this lecture about Brahma. And then all my psychic abilities came online. And I have never been the same since, in the best way. And not just because Matt came to me after he passed, not just because of my subsequent spiritual awakening, but because I understood in living with death for 2 years, watching it, having it reveal its true nature to me, I understood the meaning of life. That was the contrast that was afforded. That's the polarity that is present in everything. And I really integrated that meaning of life, which is to love, to be love, to know love, to remember love, to receive love, to give love, to embody love. And that's why we love, why we all seek love. Love is our nature. And if we're afforded an opportunity that demands the highest expression and embodiment of love because of the urgency of cancer or whatever, fill in the blank, because a life is approaching its physical end, then we're actually also provided an opportunity to embody the highest expression of life. So after Matt passed, I chose to grieve fully and deeply. That's why I hiked the Swiss Alps by myself, no guides, for 3 weeks, just in the mountains, like grieving, sobbing. It was a blessing that I was able to do that. But after he passed, I chose to grieve. I chose to live. I chose joy. I chose my purpose. I chose healing. I chose adventure. I chose to live without regrets. I chose love. I chose to love myself unconditionally. I chose to love my life unconditionally, each moment unconditionally, because that is the whole point of it all. Now, that doesn't mean that I became spineless or allowed people to walk over me or that I had no boundaries or I didn't feel any other emotions or have difficult days. It just meant that in choosing love that holistically, that fiercely, that no matter what happened externally, I always return to love. And I haven't remarried since Matt passed, because when you know the depth of what love is and can be, that is the whole point of existence. You don't settle for a love that is any less than that. You don't settle for a love that doesn't allow you to live that, to embody that, to stretch into that. And yes, I've had a couple of serious and meaningful relationships. No, they were not my next life partner. And yes, I will get remarried for sure. I know that without a doubt. But most importantly, in these 8 years of being a widow, I've learned to fall in love with myself, to be in a healthy, conscious, nurturing, and awakened relationship with myself. And that is my greatest love story. That's what my love with Matt and what Matt ultimately gifted me. That was all the catalyst for my love story with myself. Because I have fallen in love with myself. I do love every single aspect of myself unconditionally. And that has been as life-altering as my love for and with Matt, as my spiritual awakening, as the grief that transformed me after he passed. It's the love that we share with others, human or any other form of life, that is a mirror to the love that we have for ourselves. And that is the nature of love. It is everything, everywhere. And so it's always available to be felt, to be seen, to be lived, to be shared. So now, just because I've learned the true lesson and the meaning of love and life, that's not to say that rebuilding my life as a widow was easy, because it certainly was very challenging. It would have been more challenging had I not been so dedicated to love as a force, as a companion, as a comfort, as the highest truth. But yes, rebuilding a life after your partner passes, Matt and I were together for 8 years. That's a long time. After he passed, I reset my entire life. I went back to school. I went back to 2 different schools. I started my own business, became a solo entrepreneur. I moved from a giant city to a small town because why not? Why not start over? Because who I was when Matt passed was not the same person I was when Matt was diagnosed. Those 2 years with his cancer and his death completely changed me, and for the better. I was healthier, happier, freer, way more at peace, certainly way more evolved. So why not start over? Why not begin again as a version of myself who was more embodied and closer to my highest self? Why not continue to evolve? Because life is not about enduring. Life is inherently about our evolution. We're here to have an adventure. And that's what I chose to do. But, life transitions like the ones that I have undergone in the past decade, cancer, death, widowhood, starting a new career, moving to a new town, that can all have been met with resistance and fear. Or they could have been met with an open heart that loves freely and fiercely. And so I chose the latter. I have chosen to show up in my life as the latter. And that's why I have no regrets. That's why when I think about Matt's cancer and his death, there's no heaviness there. There's just love and gratitude and connection. And that's why my health and happiness and my embodiment of my innate divinity and my highest self continue to grow and not shrink as I age. That's why joy has been my emotional baseline for 8 years. Even in grief, even in the darkness of death, even in the tough transitions. Now, that doesn't mean that I deny my other emotions. I feel them all. If you've been listening to my podcast, you know that. But my equilibrium is joy, is magic, is love. So what about you? What's your equilibrium? Do you return to love or do you return to fear? Because here's the truth. Grief, death, life transitions, uncertainty, they're all an inherent part of life. No one is immune to life's inevitable cycles and transitions and transformations. But it is how we meet those moments, how we choose to love through them. That's what defines everything. Because if there is one thing that I have learned, it is this. The deeper we love, the less we have to fear. And if we can stop living in fear, fear of love, fear of tomorrow, fear of lack, fear of failing, fear of changing, fear of endings, fear of death, then we can finally start living. And love doesn't end when someone we love dies. It transforms, it expands, actually. It continues to reveal itself, to express itself in the way that we show up for others and the way that we show up for ourselves, whether or not they're walking the same path. Because that is the unconditionality of true love, of your true essence, of everything's true essence. So that's why I'm dedicating this episode to Soaring Spirits, which is an incredible organization that provides support and connection and resources to widows of all ages, all backgrounds around the world, because no one should have to navigate the loss of a partner alone. No one should have to grieve alone. And through Soaring Spirits, anyone who's grieving can find a community that understands. So if this episode has moved you, if it made you think differently about love or grief or death or life itself, I invite you to take that feeling and turn it into action and visit the link in the show notes to support Soaring Spirits, whether it's a donation or just sharing their message or mission or just simply holding space for someone in your life who is grieving. And this episode is a part of Podcastathon, which is a global event where podcasters come together to amplify causes that matter. So my story is just one of many stories, one of many podcasts and conversations. And this is a movement of voices using the podcasting platform to create change. So Please support Soaring Spirits, support Podcastathon, and thank you for listening to a bit of my love story with Matt, and thank you for choosing love. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this episode awakened you, inspired you, and reminded you of what's possible when you love, heal, and free yourself and reclaim your highest truth and power. If this show has transformed or enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please like, save, and share this episode and leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify. And subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. Your support is deeply appreciated and truly helps this show so much. And if today's episode resonated with you, don't stop here, go deeper. My book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, expands on these teachings and gives you the missing framework about self-love that no one is talking about. So get your copy today to start reading and loving yourself more. And if you're ready for the ultimate healing journey with daily instruction and guidance from me, I'd love to see you inside the Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. Remember, you were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. It's time to claim everything you want and more. All the links are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.